So you may be one of these people that work for a company and you're not allowed to have any type of personal protective tool on your person. You may just live somewhere that's very restrictive. Maybe it's the state or country that you live in. It's just, they're very heavy-handed. Regardless, though, if you find yourself in a situation when you're not allowed to have, quote unquote, traditional or formal self-defense tools, but you still want to have some options because you know, like I know, bad things happen regardless of where you are, then it's going to be very wise to look at some things that are around you and also some things that you can use on your person to potentially save your life or to save the life of someone else. And of course, throughout this list, I advocate, when possible, to get away from a threat. But sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes you have your back against the wall and you have to fight for your life, or you have to find a distraction so you can get away. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to be speaking about are going to be used to help block an attack, to help create a distraction, and or to help strike someone attacking you so that once again, you can survive the attack and or possibly even get away. So a lot of this is going to be very common sense once we get into it, but there might be some things on this list. I have about 30 items here that I want to go over, but there might be some things on the list that you may have not thought about. And then there might be some things you have thought about, but maybe I'll talk about it in a different way or fashion that you're normally accustomed to. So let's go ahead and jump into the first one. That's the footwear. Man, footwear is a pretty interesting category because when you fight, especially if you're fighting for real and it's an intense fight, you're not just using your arms and your hands to fight with, you're using your legs as well. You're using your knees and your feet. And when it comes to your feet, to strike someone with your feet, you can, run the risk of, breaking a toe, fracturing a toe, doing damage to other parts of your foot. So it's really good to have a more reinforced shoe. Now, the problem with this is that there are some shoes that are reinforced, but they're also really bulky and especially they're heavy. And that typically goes in the category of the steel-toed boots, and there's even tennis shoe style shoes that have steel toes, but they can be kind of heavy though. And so an alternative could be a composite toed shoe. And also pay attention to the tread. Does it have good grip? Is the outer sole grippy? And I like, outer soles that have a real tacky, almost like a tacky rubber. And so it's going to really be, something that can give me traction when I need it to be stable on my feet and to move around. So just be aware of the weight so that you can be light on your feet and the traction and the protection around your toe area in particular. So when you go to kick and strike with your foot, you don't injure yourself, and also you can maximize the strike because it'll be more reinforced and it'll be like a force multiplier. And so when you get hit with something that's harder and more rigid, it typically does more damage, right? So definitely, be aware of your footwear. And just for an example, talking about weight of footwear, if you have a 2-pound boot on one foot and a 2-pound boot on the other foot, that's like 4 pounds, and you can definitely get footwear that has protective qualities and that's made well for around a pound per foot. So you could, very easily shave off a pound or more on each foot just by being aware that there's options out there. And so you definitely want to be as light on your feet as possible. The less weight you have on your person, the less you have to move. And so you can move faster if you have less weight to move around. All very common sense, but a lot of people just kind of buy things because they look cool or, they just say it's super comfortable. And I'm not saying to buy something that's not comfortable, but just look at what's the most practical. If you're trying to really get away from a threat, you want something streamlined and lightweight. So let's jump to the next option here, and that's a leather belt. In particular, I'm not saying the thicker the belt, the better, but it can't hurt. If you have a more mass, and if you struck someone with a really thick leather belt, I mean, that's going to really do a number on someone. And so there's multiple ways of striking someone. You can use it as a whip. You can double it over, and hit someone like that, and then actually have even more mass at the end. You can turn it around to where the belt buckle is. In particular, if you have a pretty substantial belt buckle, you could hit someone in the head with that, and that ain't going to feel good at all. And so you definitely want to practice, though, of how to access your belt, right? You would want to practice that every once in a while, because for some people, the belt takes a moment to get on and a moment to get off. And it just depends on the type of clothing you wear. Some clothing provides resistance, and some clothing allows the belt just to slide right out. So you definitely want to practice that, just like if you were to draw a firearm out of a holster. The same thing is, undoing the belt and getting the belt off of your person, getting it out of the belt loops, and, find a technique of how it would work for you. But definitely, though, that could keep someone at bay. If you have a substantial belt that, could definitely, if anything, it could be a psychological thing. But if you had to use it to strike someone, it's not like it's going to feel good. It's going to definitely not feel good at all. So what we have next is the key ring. And this one's so simple, but you can definitely put like a key fob or a lanyard on your key ring. And especially the more keys, the better, really, right? Because a lot of keys have like sharp edges or corners, and you can flail this key ring, right, by holding onto the fob or the lanyard. And you can flail the key ring in someone's face and rake this key ring across the face. Of course, soft tissue body parts is going to be optimum, like the eyes. That's just one example. It's going to be like pretty devastating, especially if you have like half a pound to a pound of keys and you hit someone at full force, like as if you were punching them, but instead of making contact, with your fist in their face, making contact with the keys to their face, it's going to be pretty intense. So obviously you don't want to do anything here that I'm talking about unless you really have to. Of course, this is just like self-preservation. This is like self-defense for real stuff. This is not like, oh, I'm just going to play around and goof with someone and hit them with some keys. No, that ain't cool. So you definitely only want to do these when you really have to like possibly save your life. Okay, let's go to the next thing. Flashlights. This is something I just love. Flashlights. You can do so much with them. I mean, not only just everyday carry, finding things, that are in the shadows and looking for things, and using them for camping or for when you go out for a walk in the middle of the night or whatever. All the normal stuff, you could use a flashlight for, but you can also use it as a striking tool, which is really cool. But you definitely want a flashlight that has enough length so that it protrudes from your hand. So you want really a full grip. I would prefer to have a full grip. And I mean, I think that's kind of common sense. You want to really be able to have a good purchase on this product because you want to hold it and you want to really strike someone, but you want to have enough of the light coming from the palm, the striking side, to make contact, and not that, your fist is hitting someone's face, but you have maybe 1.5 inches or so, maybe even 2 inches of light, flashlight body, and the head of the light being smashed into someone's face or other body part, could even be used for like pressure point control or whatever. But the cannulated bezel is also a good feature to have. Now, some lights have a very low profile cannulated bezel. And then there are some that have these massive edges and they're just like these big serrations. I don't know so much about that. Just if you're trying to be low key and like gray man, that's not going to really work. But you can get some of the low profile cannulated bezels, and that could probably do, something more so than not. Because what those typically have is a little more of a standoff from where the lens is and the very, very, tip of what you would consider the head of the body of the light. So that little bit of a standoff helps minimize the potential of you damaging your light, especially if you have a glass lens in your light, from damaging that. But also there's the focusing of pressure on a few points of that bezel, which can cause even more pain. Then if the whole bezel was just smooth, there'd be less pain. So there's that. And then of course the obvious, you can temporarily blind someone with the light to help get away. And, the question comes up a lot in forums of like, how much light do you really need to be considered like a minimal self-defense light? It's actually a pretty good question. I can remember, though, it wasn't even that far back, like a little more than 10 years ago. I remember reading that the minimal output in terms of lumens, now they didn't go into candela and all that, but just generally speaking, in terms of lumens, about 45 lumens was just the minimum for a tactical light to clear a room safely. Now, that's pretty low output, really, compared to today's standards. But I mean, that was considered a lot of light, a little over 12, 13 years ago when I read that. And so fast forward to today and stuff, you can find keychain lights that are well over 100, even 200 lumens, and they're like all over the place. So when we're talking about a pretty decent sized light, I mean, this light that we're talking about here for self-defense doesn't have to be extremely big, but I mean, maybe like 5.5 inches to 6 inches, maybe something like that would be pretty ideal, really. And with that kind of size, you could definitely get an 18650 battery light and have a lot of capacity, and you can get those that put out well over 1,000 lumens. And so, I mean, something like that would be very substantial. I mean, 1,000 lumens or more would be really good. But even 500, I would even go so far to say 300 would be probably enough for most people to do temporarily, blinding, and I mean, it just depends on, is the person that is attacking you, are their eyes kind of adapted to the darkness? Do they have their night vision going on, or are they not? So there's a lot of factors, but yeah, just having a flashlight though is a really like a multi-use tool. Okay, let's move on. From here, I'm gonna go a little bit faster, and so I'm just going to kind of mention things. And so once again, just kind of remember that some of these tools could be used to strike with, or to block an attack, or to create a distraction, or to help get yourself away from a threat, and so forth. Some of these can even create a bit of a shock value to the person who is trying to hurt you. And once again, it may buy you just a moment to do something to get yourself free from the situation. So we have a water bottle. And I think that probably the more slim line and the taller ones are better. So you can get a better controlled grip. Because if you have those real thick water bottles, it's really hard to get a really super good grip. But if you get those thinner ones, the slim lines, you can really grab it. And especially, a nice stainless steel water bottle, the taller ones that you see, on the side of a lot of backpacks and at colleges, you could definitely take that, especially if it was full of water. Can you imagine getting hit in the head with that? That could really mess you up. Also, if you have a pocket full of change, right? And even if you don't have any money, you could just grab a few rocks off of a driveway or somewhere that has rocks and put them in your pocket if you're going into a rough area and if you have no other options. And why would you do this? Why would you have change or rocks or it's just, it could just be even a handful of pennies when I talk about change. It doesn't have to be like a certain type, but because you can create a distraction, and a lot of people aren't expecting someone to throw things at them, especially like money or rocks at them, especially in their face. Now, this is a lot more effective, though, when they're really up close and personal. Like if they're really closing in on your space and you really can't get away, and you're telling them to back off, you're giving them verbal commands, and you're trying to put, a hand out in front of you, and showing them, hey, you're in my space and I feel threatened, and they're being threatening, in a continuous fashion. Then this is when you have the other hand in your pocket and you pull it out with a handful of rocks, for example, and, you do this in a fairly swift manner, of course. You don't want to delay and just kind of linger on this, but then right into their face. And that only might buy you a second or two, So, but that could be just enough to push the person away or to move sideways and run off, find an exit, and get out of that situation. Or it could also allow you to go to get something else, maybe in the environment. Maybe you see like a 2x4 over there in the ditch or something, and you can run over there and get that and use it to create more distance. And you see what I'm saying? You can fight your way out of a situation. The next thing I want to say is that a rolled up newspaper. I mean, some people have heard about this, but it's quite amazing how rigid and stiff a newspaper can be when you roll it up really tight. And some people like to roll it up and then fold it over one time. And it's almost like a little baton, you know? I mean, it's pretty impressive. So, I mean, you definitely don't want to get hit by it. I mean, it can really bruise you pretty substantially. It just depends on how strong you are and how able-bodied you are to strike someone with it. But if you have a bit of upper body strength, you could definitely deter someone from trying to punch you if you have this, and this is going to be an extension of your arm. So you have a little more reach too, keeping yourself just that much further away from that threat. The next thing would have to be a steel or aluminum pin. Now, for the most part, you know, this is something that you really don't ever want to have to deploy, because that really does mean that you're really up close and personal on this person. And I mean, that's really dangerous. Once again, there's a lot of people out there that have more skills than you do in terms of hand-to-hand combatives. And the likelihood that they could take that from you, or, you know, it's a very high probability, especially if you don't have a lot of skills in using a self-defense pin. But in terms of this is not going to be a quote unquote self-defense pin. This is just like your over-the-counter office pin that just happens to be built very well, like a nice stainless steel pin. Some of the aluminum pins, when I put that on the list, because some of them are built okay, but there are some that are really thin-walled on the body of the pin, and you want to avoid those. So you definitely don't want to use plastic pins or wooden pencils to strike with. I mean, if that's all you had and someone's trying to kill you, you just do what you can. But I mean, if you have the choice ahead of time to plan ahead, man, a nice stainless steel, like a nice thick-bodied, robust pin. I mean, you know, definitely get a full size so that you can get the most reach, and go for soft, you know, tissue areas, eyes, ears, even the throat, that can really, really mess you up. Of course, once again, only do that if you have to, if it's a life-threatening situation. Hot coffee or hot tea in the face. Man, that kind of pretty much caused almost anyone, unless they were just completely high on drugs and they were completely out of their mind, anyone with any kind of level of concern for their well-being is going to back off really fast if their whole face is on fire. And man, I mean, I think that we all know what it's like to burn ourselves with some type of hot beverage, right? In particular with hot coffee. I mean, I don't personally drink hot coffee, but I have in the past had some hot tea, and I've spilt it, you know, one time on my leg. And you're talking about, it was horrific. And I knew a person a few years ago. I was in the car with them, and she went and got some hot coffee, and she just couldn't wait till we got to the destination. And so she was trying to drive. She was trying to drive and drink the coffee, and some of it spilt on her lap, and it looked like it was horrendous. She had to pull over. It was just horribly painful. So yeah, I mean, definitely don't do this unless you had to. This is a very horrible thing. You could definitely, you know, have scarring. You could probably even blind someone potentially if the coffee or the tea was hot enough. So just be real careful. But this one can be very effective. It can be very effective. And you look very non-threatening, especially if you're just minding your own business and you got your little cup of tea and it just happens to be boiling hot, and you're just over there just barely sipping it because it's almost too hot to even drink, and someone tries to threaten you or try to take your money or your wallet or whatever, and you're like, back off, and then they keep pushing, they get physical, and then boom, in their face. That definitely buy you some time. So let's go ahead and move on. The next thing I want to say is that instead of trying to find like a specific survival whistle, and I really hate this term, but you know, the whole term of rape whistle, I think I hate that because I've had some friends in the past kind of tease me a little bit about that, because I've always had some type of like, you know, whistle on my key ring for many years. I don't currently do that. Just because I found that I never used it, and it just kind of was a little bulky. But I'm not saying you can't have an official rape whistle, whatever that means, really. But what I found, though, is even just kind of more common, and it's just a lot easier to find, and it's typically a lot more inexpensive. It's just a good referee whistle, right? They have a kind of a higher pitch shrill to them. And I mean, you can get some really good name brands for just a couple bucks each. Even at big box stores, they have referee whistles. So That's something to look at. And I'd probably get one in a bright coloration. So in low light conditions, you can identify it, quickly and get access to it. So what does a referee whistle or any type of whistle that's going to have some really good output do if someone's attacking you or trying to threaten you? It's going to probably disorient them just a little bit, at least potentially. I mean, once again, unless they're on like some really heavy amounts of drugs, but it could like turn them off in the sense that they don't want that attention and they may run off. I mean, there's been lots of stories about that. Someone's in a parking garage and trying to, do something really nasty with a woman, and she gets on her whistle and blasts it a few times, and he runs off because he's afraid someone's going to see them and then, and come to her aid, and he doesn't want that attention. A lot of criminals are cowards and they kind of only work in the shadows of the night. But yeah, it could do that. You could also kind of like temporarily mess with their ears. I mean, if you're able to like really bear down on that whistle and get some real high decibel output, and you're like literally like inches from their ears, I mean, that could actually be painful. Now, I have a full range of whistles. I kind of collect whistles. I mean, I don't do them right now. I don't like actually collect anymore. But for a number of years, I collected some whistles. And I have so many that I just couldn't really, justify buying any more because they're all very good. I was like, I don't have any more need for more. But I have a few that are just so loud that even when I blow the whistle myself, like I actually hurt my own ears. I'm talking some serious noise. And but those are safety whistles. I mean, they're a lot larger than a traditional like referee whistle. But just saying that there are some whistles out there that can be very painful to the ears. But if you get a good quality referee whistle, you have just enough output, especially if you're within a few feet, to make it undesirable to be around you. And if someone sees you blowing a whistle that hard, they may say that, whoa, that person's just too feisty, that there are just more problems than anything else. I'm just going to get out of here before things escalate. At least, you can hope for that. And if it doesn't get much better and they still want to attack you, then you can go with some of these other options we're talking about. Okay, let's go to the next, and that is the metal clipboard. The metal clipboard. Now, it could also be some other types of clipboards. Like, for example, I have a clipboard, no joke, that is 23 years old, and it's made out of like, it seems like it's some type of like plexiglass. It's either like I don't really know for sure. Like it kind of like looks between like a plexiglass and some type of, I just don't really know. It could be a polymer too, but it almost also has like, I don't really know, but all I can say is it's amazing. I mean, this thing is amazing. It's so strong. And after like all these years, it's holding really well. Now, if you can find something like that, that's built like a tank, you don't want like injected molded plastic type of stuff. This is not like that. This is like really robust. It actually has a little bit of weight to it. But this clipboard or, a metal clipboard could do a lot of damage, if a corner of it was like shoved in your face or in your neck. Of course, if someone's trying to punch you, you could use it and hold it up and to block punches. And someone's fist going into a really hard surface like a clipboard could really mess with your fingers and their hands and their knuckles and all that. So it's just an option. A metal stapler. Now, this is not something that you'll probably have on your person so much. If you do carry a big old metal stapler, then that's pretty different. Like, I don't know anyone that does that. But especially if you're in the office, or maybe you carry office supply around in like a briefcase, then you might have it with you. But especially if you're in the office and something goes down, you can grab a big metal stapler. And a lot of those staplers, they open up. They swing out. They swing out about 180 degrees. And can you imagine getting whacked in the face with that? Some of those I've seen, they have some weight behind them, man. They're way over a pound, maybe 2 pound staplers. So that's something. Also, like office supplies, we're talking about like metal scissors. I've seen some old school, massive, they're very substantial scissors with the pointy ends and everything. Can you imagine getting stabbed by one of those? Holy moly. That could certainly help you. That's like a weapon, really. You could easily make that into a weapon. Also, A metal ruler. Now, I know, like, it seems like these are more rare. Now, when I was a kid, almost all the rulers that we got for school were wooden. We had wooden, and then after like my grade school, that I kind of got into, like, I guess it was like a clear plastic, but yeah, we did those for a while, and then when I went to college, I noticed that people had metal rulers, and they probably have been around for a long time. I just really wasn't that, accustomed to seeing people with metal rulers, and there were some really nice ones too. And man, some of those metal rulers, the edges were actually kind of sharp. And so, yeah, I mean, can you imagine getting hit in the head with a really solid ruler, like a nice steel ruler? That could do something. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. The walking stick. The walking stick. Now, this is a little bit less stealth to some degree, because you don't typically see just people walking down the street with a walking stick. So, I mean, this is kind of maybe only in certain areas you could get away with this. Obviously, you're not going to probably want to walk into your place of business if you're like an office worker and just walk in there with this big walking stick. That's not going to really blend in. That's not gray man. But you can kind of think of in those places that you can get away with a walking stick. It's almost like a staff, really, right? And what you can do with the staff is tremendous. I mean, you can really keep even a number of people at bay if you know certain techniques, and you can strike with that. You can do some amazing things. I mean, that thing could probably be lethal. So, I mean, yeah, it just depends on the material, but there's a lot of walking sticks that are like really solid hardwood. They're made of hardwood, and those could be an amazing tool to have. And to my knowledge, most places don't have any kind of restrictions on walking sticks, I mean, they may in the future because that's how places are, but now let's go to the next, and that is the cane. Now, especially if you're a little bit on the life experienced side, if you have a few years to your name, and you can kind of get away with this, even though you may not ever have a real need for this, you can just use this as a prop as you go through your day. But then at the same time, you have this, basically, it's almost like an extended like baton at your disposal. So as long as you don't just like move around as if, you're an athlete, and you don't cause some kind of, contrast between this whole concept that you need a cane. And I'm not saying you walk around and act like you're feeble and you can't hardly walk straight and you're limping on purpose, you're faking all that. I'm not saying doing any of that. That's ridiculous. But I am saying though that, if you're going into like a really dangerous area, and let's just say there's like the laws in your place of living, maybe you live in a country that you can't really own anything for self-defense. Maybe it's just like a really restrictive environment. Then maybe something like a cane is, going to be something that you could, use. And if a police officer or government official, whatever, questions why you have that, you just tell them, hey, I need a little assistance to walk straight, or I feel like I'm going to fall over, or whatever, I mean, good Lord. So a cane, and you don't have to lie about it. You can just be honest. You're saying, hey, my back's a little bit strained and I just need this cane. If that's truthful, you just say that. And, I mean, for some people, you may not want a cane, maybe it's just not for you. So let's move on. So the next is a metal reinforced umbrella. Now, this is where a lot of people would be okay with. Now, there's all kinds of umbrellas. I've had some umbrellas that only lasted a few days and they fell apart. And then I've had some that lasted years and years and years. And so there are some that are kind of like made of like a fiberglass and a metal, or some of them are just all metal. I mean, there's even some that have swords built into them. I don't know if you want to take that kind of chance, especially if you live in a restrictive environment. That could be completely illegal. So we're not going that route. But there are some reinforced umbrellas for sure out there that are made to actually be used for a self-defense tool that you can actually use to strike and to do all kinds of things. And it's made to hold up. So you definitely want to look at those reinforced umbrellas. Some of them do use more like composite materials and others are more like, metal. But you want to see which ones, that you may like and look at that. Now, if you are a person that works in a trade, maybe you have like a tool belt on most of the day, or maybe you have access to certain tools, right, in your environment, like a hammer or a screwdriver or, maybe it's an ice pick. Maybe you work in a restaurant and you're chiseling ice for whatever reason. Maybe, you work in a kitchen and you just have access to a kitchen knife. Maybe you just work in an office and they have like a break room, and in that break room they have a few knives, so that you can just cut your food or whatever. Well, in an emergency, you could always egress to that location and acquire those items for defense. It's just, just a suggestion. So let's move on here. And I'll try to go a little bit faster because I know this video is a bit long, but I think it's just kind of interesting, what all the options are. And this list is just the beginning. This is just kind of a suggestion. There's so many other things. And this video probably is a little bit more for those people who live like in Europe that have lots of restrictions. I get a lot of messages from people from Europe. And I have a few videos out that talk about some of this, but some of these videos have been out for a while. They're like a year or two old. And so there's a lot of people who can't find them, or they just want to kind of have a newer video on this. So this is what this is. And so some of these things that I'm talking about now, I haven't talked about before. So another option could be this, a metal coffee mug. I mean, I've seen some made out of like zinc or pewter. Man, the pewter ones are really heavy, but stainless steel could be another option. But a real heavy duty coffee mug, especially if it's for at work, and you just kind of have it there on your desk. It's not like you have to carry it around, but there's some kind of disturbance. Someone gets into your workplace and wants to hurt someone. Can you imagine getting hit in the head with a big old coffee mug? And maybe as a bonus, maybe it's filled up with hot coffee. So imagine getting burned in the face and then getting hit in the head with a big mug. That could put you down. Also, now this one's really interesting, and I don't really hear almost anyone talking about this. Well, I mean, I actually have not heard anyone talk about this as a defensive tool in an emergency situation in restrictive environments. But to my knowledge, there is no actual restriction on this. But it could definitely be pretty, helpful if you have nothing else, and that is a metal straw. There's this fad going on the last few years I've been seeing that people don't want to use, disposable straws because they don't want to litter, right, in landfills and all that, which is kind of a good thing. That there's people mindful about all this. So what people are doing is buying reusable straws, and a lot of these are made of stainless steel or titanium. No joke. And they're not really expensive. I mean, but I've seen different kinds though. There's some of them have different lengths. Some of them have different bends. Some of them are just straight. Some of them have different just different designs, right? And some of them are thicker than others, and some of them are thinner than others. But so you might want to look and just find one that's fairly robust. Can you imagine striking someone with that in the eyes or the ears? Man. Or even in the torso, just striking the body, in general with something like that would probably hurt like you wouldn't believe. You could do some damage with a metal straw. Now, the alcohol-based hand sanitizer, can you imagine, even in a small container, like a keychain size container, if someone put enough pressure on that and squirted out a good amount in your face and it gets in your eyes, I would have to come to a conclusion that would burn pretty bad, right? I mean, I've never tried alcohol-based hand sanitizer in the eyes, but I would only imagine that wouldn't feel good. And at the very minimum, it would kind of buy you at least a few seconds to kind of move away and get away from the threat. Also, a metal comb. You don't really see these that often, though. It's like these custom-made combs that are made out of titanium. And you see them, but they're really expensive, and most people don't have those. But what I do see, though, as more practical option instead of the comb, is a brush. And some of the brushes are kind of low-key, too. They're not like these big full brushes. They're almost like a half brush in terms of it's like a travel-size brush. But some of them I've seen are has full metal construction. And I've even seen some that are wood construction, they use hardwood. And I mean, you know what? I mean, it's better than nothing, right? Can you imagine using that like a Kubotan or striking it in someone's face? Or, I mean, it's possible maybe using it for pressure points. It's something, right? Well, this one I like a lot. And this is a metal lunchbox with a sturdy reinforced handle. Now, instead of like a plastic lunchbox or a paper bag or something like that, go ahead and invest in a nice, really sturdy metal lunchbox for work. You know, that could be something that could last a long time and pay for itself. But can you imagine getting hit in the head with a really sturdy, well-built metal lunchbox? I mean, that could possibly knock you out if it's full of food, and especially if there's drinks in there. Think about the weight behind that. I mean, you have a lot of mass, and especially if you have some upper body strength and you swing that as if you were punching someone and they get hit in the head with that, they could knock them out. Okay. Next is a briefcase, and a briefcase can be used as kind of like a shield. It could help block punches or attacks, especially from a knife fight. There's all kinds of briefcases I've seen. Some of them are really nice. Of course, you have like the ones that are kind of like finished out with like leather or vinyl. But then you also have those that kind of have that aluminum shell. Those are really nice. They're very modern. And I would imagine that could probably resist a bit of a puncture. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, some of that looks pretty strong. It sure is better than nothing. But yeah, definitely as a shield or as a bracing, material to kind of keep someone off. You could use it to push someone away from you. Just a barrier, really, like a portable barrier. And I mean, if you really had to as well, you could take the briefcase and just hit someone in the body with it, especially in the face. And that wouldn't feel very good. I mean, I would imagine most briefcases weigh more than just a couple pounds, especially if you have it loaded down really well. It could be 10 or more pounds. So that could be, it could almost be a pretty serious weapon. Okay, and let's move to the next. And that would be a decoy wallet. A decoy wallet. And this one is less of like a defensive like weapon or tool, more so than just like a kind of like a psychological thing that can be deployed. You can take the wallet and toss it somewhere and they can go and run for that wallet while you run the other way. Or you can just use it to preserve your real wallet so that you don't really get robbed. You just give it to them and then maybe they run off. It depends on the person, of course. And I also want to kind of talk about purses real quick. Being a guy, I don't really know much about purses or handbags, but I kind of picked the purse because a lot of them have obviously straps, and you could actually take it off the body and use it and swing it. And if there's enough weight in the purse, I would imagine it wouldn't be very comfortable to get hit with a purse, especially a heavier purse. And I would imagine that there's probably certain purses that are like more impactful than others. Like, for example, like a soft cloth purse wouldn't probably, do much to you. But if you had a really rigid, like leather purse, I wonder if that would be, ladies, if you would let me know in the comment section what kind of purse would be best, because there's people looking for this information. No joke. You come back to this video in a year or two and you'll be surprised how many people view it. And the videos that I've done on this topic in the past years, they're just amazing how many people have contacted me and how many people have watched the videos, and they're just real thankful for the videos. And I'm very thankful for you guys watching and participating, but in the comment section, feel free to share and help each other out. If you have any other further ideas as well from this list, I really do appreciate that. So let's move on. I just have a few more left, and because I don't want this video to go on for eternity. Now, this is kind of stepping a little bit further into like a lot of proactive type of thinking here and doing. So this involves you making something, and that is to take some hot pepper juice and putting it into, let's say, like a small squeeze container, or even like a little hand sanitizer container that's, you can squeeze, and you could use that. So if you're not allowed to have like actual quote unquote pepper spray or pepper gel, you can make your own little pepper juice container. Maybe that could be illegal though. So make sure you look at your law, but it could be something, right? It could be something. And let me just go through here. And I think I actually went over everything. I thought I had a few more, but let's just look here real quick before I end the video. So it does look like that I've pretty much covered everything. Yes, I have, at least to the ones that I wanted to cover today, and maybe down the future we'll do more. But I think it's very important, though, to be aware of your surroundings and aware of your options on your person and the things around you that you can pull from in an emergency if you have a self-defense issue come up. In today's climate, at least at the time of this video in particular, where there's a lot of civil unrest in various pockets around the world. And here in America, I don't remember things being ever this bad, at least in my lifetime. And I'm not that old, really. I'm not that young either, but I'm not so old that I remember things like some people might. And at the same time, I'm aware that things could get worse too. So even if you are able to have, quote unquote, formal or traditional self-defense tools at your disposal, it's always good to have a few others, right, that we just talked about at your disposal as well, and to be aware of them and to practice using them. So let me just do a quick example. So maybe you have a firearm that you would use in a worst case scenario. And then, you'd have maybe 2 or 3 non-lethal options, right? Maybe a Kubotan on your keychain. Maybe you have a flashlight that you can temporarily blind someone also and strike with it. And then maybe you have pepper spray or pepper gel. And maybe that's your loadout right there for your official self-defense tools. But then maybe, of course, you have a decent leather belt, right, that we just talked about earlier. Maybe you carry a metal, water bottle, a nice slender metal water bottle that you could use. And maybe you have a briefcase that you can use as a shield to help block something or to create distance or even strike with. And so when you put all this together, you have quite a few options. And for those people who aren't able to use, traditional self-defense tools because of rules or laws or whatnot, just restrictions, you can still have 2, 3 or more options, just because you see things with multiple uses. Just talking about footwear, for example. I love that example because it really shows that, okay, the traction is important, the type of shoe and how it's built is important, where it's reinforced is important. All this matters in the big picture. And in particular, the weight too. You don't want real heavy shoes. You want to be light on your feet, And in particular, with all these things, when possible, go with things that are streamlined, light, and, just not just lightweight, but also just kind of minimum bulk. You don't want big, bulky things, right? So I really do hope this helps. And I hope everyone's safe and they stay safe out there. It's just a bunch of madness. And I hope things just kind of calm down. I kind of doubt it in the near term, but I do see eventually things will calm down. They typically do. But we might have a number of months ahead of us, maybe even a year or so ahead of us of just off and on problems before society just kind of chills out, right? And who knows how much this has to do with economics? Who knows how much this has to do with politics? There could be a lot of combination of things, or it could just mainly be one thing that's setting people off. But I think over time, things typically dissipate, and things typically get worked out eventually over time. And so I'm always, praying for just peace for the individual. We can't just give peace to people, and we can't force peace on people. People have to find their own inner peace. And a lot of people are not searching within themselves for this place of peace that we all have. They're all looking outward for peace, and you can't find it that way. Just like you can't outwardly look for happiness or joy. It has to be created. It has to be built upon inside of us. And so it is kind of crazy how people are so outward these days and their approach toward just having a quality life. They think it's like all out there and not within, and that they have to go out and do all this seeking, and they have to do all this acquiring to have this so-called good life. But the good life is already there. We already have it. We were born with it. It's just people haven't tapped into it typically. And how sad that is. How sad. So many people wasting so much time and living in misery and choosing to suffer when they don't have to. It's quite amazing. So it's my hope that the world wakes up and finds out that it's not the outside world that matters so much. It's the inside world within us. That's what's really special and amazing. And that's what we have control over. And that's what we can connect with. And that's what we can grow within. You guys take care. Catch you later.